It doesn't take much to get a reputation for being a boozer around these parts.
In some ways, what you might call alcoholism of Christopher Hitchens was a non-issue as far as his arguments. He could have been completely pissed and it wouldn't matter. And yet you find time and time again Christians, Muslims and others who are willing to argue against his work, and they use as a main cut and thrust of their rebuke, or their attempt to rebuke, the idea that he was an alcoholic and a heavy smoker, and he was a heavy smoker and a heavy drinker. You might call him, as far as alcoholism, a functioning alcoholic. Interestingly, the majority of people who do this kind of attack are basically Muslim, and they're saying, oh well, if he didn't drink, if he was, a good Muslim as opposed to being a bad atheist, then perhaps he would be still here. If that was the case, it wouldn't be the same thing, and we would go to different authors. It's not simply about having people on board with Islam or Christianity or even atheism. It's about how valid are their statements. Christopher Hitchens made some invalid statements over the years, but certainly made a great many valid ones. He had been drinking for many years. I don't think he was in danger of being told that he drinks like a Muslim, so I don't think it really works out too badly if he had a couple of drinks at lunch, maybe 2 with his main meal, and a couple of whiskies on the evening. He wasn't a heavy drinker in most cases, although certainly he drank more than his fair share. All of that to one side. At no point, even if you refuted Hitchens as an individual, would it refute his arguments as far as religion. That would take some more effort. For some Muslims, that might well be enough anyway. Just say he's an alcoholic and, oh yes, his argument's clearly invalid because he drinks. But in reality, it just does not work, and if we use that kind of argument against Islam, well, we can do a lot more harm, because atheists don't have prophets, and, well, Islam does. And what can we see from Muslim prophets, including those of the Old Testament, the Jewish prophets? We can see a great amount of immorality. And if we look at the Prophet Muhammad himself, he was a pedophile. So if I think we were going to use that argument to refute anything, that kind of argument, we could use it with far more force against Islam than against atheism. So you may well point to people like Christopher Hitchens and say, he was a heavy drinker. I just don't think it proves anything, really. Whereas in the case of the Prophet Muhammad, if you say things of him, a man who is meant to be supposedly guided by the divine, well, his immorality says something quite interesting about the divine character itself. How come there are so many things not said in the Quran? So many things that would have been moral injunctions which would have taken civilization forward centuries. How come that wasn't done? How come it's taken years for people in many parts of the world to drag themselves forward as the barbarism of early Christianity, early Islam, and going back with early Judaism? It's taken lots of reform, and if we see the prophets there doing horrible things or saying immoral things, even with supposedly meek and mild Jesus, it says something very clear, something very precise about the nature of religion, which we cannot ignore. And it suggests that that being, that God, whether you call it Yahweh, Jehovah, or for that matter, Allah, or whatever the case may be, that character appears to be an immoral character that's willing to say practically anything is a moral act, as long as that particular deity, that particular entity, insists that people follow it. So anything can be done. And it's moral? Oh, why is it moral? Because it came from Allah. Or because it came from Yahweh. That is gross immorality, in my opinion, where anything can be called moral or immoral, based on a drop of a hat.
It doesn't take much to get a reputation for being a boozer around these parts.